This is going to be a little bit long, as I've had a lot of experiences growing up, but I hope you guys find them as creepy and as fascinating as I do. So, when I was about 2, my family moved into a newly built house in a small town in North Carolina. It all started when my mum would be putting me into the crib at night, and I would constantly look around her into the hallway and ask her in my own baby way who those people were and what did they want. She said that it always scared the crap out of her, but that she always reassured me that no one was there. When I was about 7 or 8, I began to play with a neighborhood boy about my age, and we became instant friends. We played pretty much all day while his grandmother kept a close watch over him, sometimes in my house and sometimes outside, riding our bikes or playing hide and seek. I didn't find it weird at that age, but looking back, I know that his grandmother was dressed in like early 1900s clothing, a long dress with a collar, very simple, like she made it either herself or someone else did, and her hair was always pulled back into a neat bun. One night, I asked my mum if he could stay for dinner, and she kept asking who. Later, she told me that we were only the 3rd house built in the neighborhood at the time, and the other 2 houses, they hadn't been sold yet. When I was about 10, we had a snow day and school got cancelled. My parents went to work, but my 2 siblings, who still lived in the house at the time, were both in high school and stayed home with me. I knew better than to go and wake them up really early when I woke up, so I eagerly and impatiently waited for them to wake up so that we could go play in the snow. I was watching TV when I heard the door leading to the garage that's off to the kitchen open. It makes a distinct squeaking noise when it opens. I heard them stomp their feet and get the snow off their boots on the rug by the door. I ran over to the door excited and disappointed that they'd gone to play without me. The door was standing wide open with wet spots on the rug, but there wasn't anyone there. I ran up to their bedrooms and they were both still asleep. And not long after this, things started escalating from the usual footsteps or things going missing only to be found days later in a totally different random place. My brother, 17 at the time, started complaining that he wasn't sleeping well. He said that he heard whispers in his room, like multiple people were having multiple different conversations at once, but the whispers were so low that he couldn't make out what anyone was saying. He would also wake up to the closet door open when he religiously shut it before going to bed every night. One night, the whispering started, but this time it was followed by a scratching noise. He soon realized that it was coming from below his bed. At this time, he heard a deep guttural laughter right in his ear, as if someone or something was crouched beside his bed with their mouth beside his ear. Needless to say, he slept on my parents' bedroom floor on a pallet for months after that. When I was 10 too, I woke up one night and I just couldn't breathe. It felt like an elephant was sitting on my chest. I was young and was panicked and wasn't thinking clearly, so I didn't run to my parents' room. It wasn't sleep paralysis too, because I could still move. But I laid there for what felt like an eternity, but was probably about 2 to 3 minutes, when suddenly my bedroom door opened and my mum walked in. I was so relieved, but thought that it was odd that she knew that I was going through this because I hadn't been able to call out to her. She slowly walked over to my bed and I instantly grabbed her hand. I remember thinking how cold it was in mine. But she stood beside my bed and very, very slowly bent over at the waist until her face was about 2 inches from mine and stayed that way for about 30 seconds, freaking the hell out of me. Then, just as slowly, stood back up straight, dropped my hand and walked out of the room, shutting the door. About a minute or 2 later, I was able to breathe again and I ran to my parents' room and my dad laid reading and my mum laid beside him. I was crying and yelling, asking why she had left and acted so weird and was so cold. My dad proceeded to tell me that she'd been asleep for over an hour and had never come into my room. And so, I slept with my sister that night. Not long after this, too, I woke up to banging one night and poked my head out of my bedroom door. My parents' room was to my right at the end of the hall, and at the other end of the hall was the bathroom that me and my sister and my brother all shared. My dad came out of his room, and we were able to follow the noise to our bathroom. He turned on the light, and we both watched as all of our cabinet drawers and doors just simultaneously opened and slammed in unison. He looked down at me and looked just as scared as I was. He yelled out, "Stop," and they all just slammed shut and stopped immediately. My parents are very religious and Roman Catholic, in fact, so naturally they called our parish priest to come and bless the house again, this being the third time. This time, when he came, he told us all to take a walk around the neighborhood while he performed an exorcism in and on our home. I didn't know what that thing was at the time, but he assured us that it would help, so I was okay with it. When we got back from our walk, about 30 minutes later, he was in the driveway waiting for us. He very quickly said that things were fine and that he would see us at church on Sunday, and got in his car and left. I remember thinking how odd that was, though, because he was close to our family and we had planned for him to stay for dinner and everything. He never did tell us, too, why he left like that. Things seemed to calm down and go back to normal after that, though. Footsteps and misplaced items. My parents still live in that house, and I'm not ashamed to say that my 25-year-old self refuses to sleep in my old bedroom until this day. I have more stories, but I'll save them for another time. I hope you guys enjoyed this. So this happened to me about a month ago. For some context too. I'm a woman in my mid-20s who lives alone in a cozy flat in the attic area of an old Victorian building, up in the old servants' quarters where I belong. The design of the roof hanging over my window and the high driveway walls means that I get some interesting acoustics. During the quiet nighttime, the sounds bounce up from the whole long street, even from out of sight, and I can hear the footsteps and conversations of passerbys as crystal clear as if they were in the room with me. Yet, standing down on the drive, you can't hear them at all. It was almost 4 a.m. and pitch dark outside. I had been finding it hard to sleep properly the last few nights, so I was still up and pottering around in my PJs with the lights on. I had the window cracked and the blinds half open to get some fresh air in. I usually keep them closed if I have a light on at night. You can see right into my room from the street and the houses across, which I sadly did not realize for my first couple of months here. Sorry neighbors if you saw me dancing and cooking in my underwear. However, I was so flustered from not getting sleep and desperate for air, I thought everybody else would be snoozing. So I'd done the same for the previous 3 or 4 sleepless nights. I had just made some tea and settled down to read a book when I heard my door buzzer ringing. I remember thinking that it was odd that I had not heard anybody approaching, as I was just sat by my window. But I brushed it off as being sleep-deprived. Nobody who visits me ever rings my door buzzer. They call my phone, so I grabbed my phone to check if I had missed something from a friend or a family. But no, there was nothing. So I quickly ran to the window to look down at the porch, but unfortunately I could only see the steps leading up to it. The motion sensor light was on though, and I could hear strange scuffling noises and then some thuds. I figured somebody had called the wrong flat by mistake or something and was probably just drunkenly stumbling around out there. But even with my rational explanation, a strange sense of just unease overwhelmed me. I felt on edge after I heard the thuds and turned my lights off so I could gawp through the blinds without being seen. But unfortunately, I couldn't see much. After a few minutes, the noises stopped and the motion sensor light turned off, although I didn't see anybody come back down the steps. I figured that I'd either missed them in the dark or the person that they were looking for had just let them in. After 20 minutes or so, I relaxed and turned my lamp back on to potter around again. But about a minute later, though, my buzzer rang again, and this time it was ringing repeatedly as if someone was aggressively holding the button down. I froze and stared at it for a while, unsure what to do now. It was starting to get annoying, though, and I began to worry that it might actually be somebody that I know who needs help. I mean, why else would they be ringing at my door at like 4 a.m. in the morning? And so I plucked up the courage to answer this time, albeit with a shaky hand. I said hello, but there was no reply. But I can hear somebody breathing heavily through the phone static. It sounded like a man. Who is this and what do you want? Again, no reply, just breathing. I hung up, thinking that they'd got the wrong flat or the telecom was playing up again, and I stayed by the wall phone for a few moments, staring at it, unsure what to do. The buzzer went off loudly again, though, and I just about jumped out of my skin as I was so tense. Who is this? Why do you keep calling me? All I can hear is static again. Thinking that I was getting knocked down gingered, ding-dong ditching for my US friends across the big pond, I went to hang up the phone again. But just before I did, I could hear a muffled voice, and I whipped the phone back to my ear and demanded to know who it was. What was that? Let me in. What? Who are you? Let me in. Please, please. His voice starts breaking into a panic. I'm not letting you in. You haven't said who you are. There's people coming to get me. They tried to jump me and I ran away. I'm not safe out here. Please, you've got to let me in. Please. Immediately, I noped the heck out and hung up the wall phone. There was no way that I was letting a strange man into my building who wouldn't identify himself, especially as I had to leave the safety of my locked flat to physically go down to the front porch to open it. My gut was also telling me that his story was just complete crap, but on the off chance that it was true, I was worried that there was about to be a crazy fight on my driveway. So I grabbed my mobile phone and dialed 999 as I ran to turn my lights off and shut the blinds again, peeking out through a crack. The man had been ringing my buzzer non-stop since I hung up, but shortly after I turned the lights out, it stopped again. The weird shuffling and the thumping noises on the porch started up again as I explained the situation to the emergency operator on the phone. She urged me to stay calm and stay on the phone with her and said that the police were already aware that something was happening. Somebody else in my building had called earlier to say that a man had been trying to break into the front door after trying all the ground floor windows down the side and the back. They'd had a similar call a few nights before too, and that explains the weird noises that I kept hearing and why I didn't hear him approach from the street at the front. The noises had now stopped, but I was beginning to panic pretty hard. I asked the lady when the police would arrive, and she said that they would send out a unit as soon as one was available. Yay, recent cuts to police funding, am I right? And to stay locked inside. After 10 minutes of no activity outside and the motion light turning off, the lady said to stay in my flat with the door locked. Sure, like I was going to do anything else anyway. And to call back if he reappeared, and they'd escalate it to their end if he made it into the building, and then she just ended the call. I sat by the window watching, and sure enough, a few minutes later, the noises started again and the light below came on. To be honest, I really don't think he ever left, or he went down the side to the car park at the back or something. I still couldn't see what was going on because of the angle from my window. I was about to call the police again when a taxi driver passing by slammed on his brakes and shouted out of his window, and I stopped to listen. The taxi driver said, "Hey you, what are you doing over there? I dropped you off on the other side of town an hour ago." Which meant that the taxi driver knew this man. What a twist, right? The random man said, "Oh hey, I lost my keys. My friends live here and I'm trying to get a hold of them to let me in." I see the shoulder and the leg of the man come around the corner slightly, and the taxi driver says, "You told me that you were going home to sleep it off and wouldn't be causing any more trouble like earlier. I asked you to get out and you begged me to drop you home still, so I did, and now you're not at home." The man then says, "I just said that I had no keys to get in. I'm trying to stay with my friends, they live here." You could hear at this point that the man was getting agitated, and an edge was creeping into his tone as he lied again. The taxi driver then said, "So why are you skulking down the side there making a ruckus instead of ringing the bell? What's going on? What are you really doing?" And the man gets angry at this point and storms down the driveway to confront the taxi driver. This is my first time getting a proper look at him, although I could only see the back of him. And he looked like a pretty normal, well-presented young guy with brown hair, black t-shirt, jeans, and trainers. I was actually surprised, based on his appearance. I mean, he would not be somebody that I would normally think to avoid late at night. I couldn't really make out what he said next, as they were both shouting over each other, but I could hear the taxi driver yell "police," and the man suddenly leapt towards his car door. The taxi driver quickly screeched off down the road, leaving the man standing there swearing and seething. It was at this point that I realized that I'd been a complete idiot, frozen by the window, watching this scene unfurl beneath me without calling the police to let them know that he was back. I ducked down to pick up my phone, which I must have dropped amidst the commotion. As I spoke to a different operator, the man turned around and strolled down the driveway a little bit, but seemed to hesitate and stop, staring up at my building. I tried to get a good look at his face, but it was way too dark to make out much detail. He stood like this for almost 10 minutes, just standing there and staring up at my window, occasionally swaying from side to side. I knew rationally that he couldn't see me peeking out, but I could have sworn that he was staring right at me and knew that I was there. He stopped looking at my window and turned to stare at the door for a few moments. I was begging the emergency operator to get the police out here sooner, as I was worried that he was going to try the door again. However, I think the confrontation with the taxi driver made him lose his nerve, and he was worried about police showing up. I could hear him make an odd kind of huffing or snorting noise of frustration as he turned and left my driveway, slowly walking down the street and out of sight. I updated the emergency operator with the direction that he was headed off in, and then I ended the call. About 10 minutes later, I saw a police car cruise by with its headlights off, heading the way that he'd gone. Unsurprisingly, they never found him though, as it had just been too long and there were way too many streets and alleys around for him to just slip down and away from. He never did come back again, but I stayed vigilant by that window until sunrise, crying my little eyes out and chain-smoking like hell. I didn't sleep properly for weeks afterwards, and I get extremely paranoid walking to and from my building now. I've stopped taking the bins down too if the sun is even slightly setting now, and luckily I had already begun the process to move elsewhere for unrelated reasons, so I only have to live here for a couple more weeks before I move to a big house with friends. It's a bit of a shame too, because I liked living on my own before this, but now I'm really grateful to be losing my privacy to have some backup. Also, I want to give a shout out to the brave taxi driver who stopped to confront him. You were more helpful than the local police, and I don't know if he would have left if you had not scared him off like that. And boy do I wish that I could ask you what the hell happened when you met that man earlier in the night. So I enlisted when I was 17 back in 2011 for multiple reasons, but I just wanted to serve and fight mostly. Typical 17-year-old jock video gamer, right? Anyways, even though I was a machine gunner in the infantry, I never saw combat because the war had died down quite a bit and I got sent all over Asia and the Pacific instead. But man, did things get weird in Korea. So, we were sent to this island just miles off the DMZ of North Korea to train with the Republic of South Korean Marines, ROK Marines. It's a small island, maybe 10 miles across, but it had just an insane amount of hills. While on the island, we were camping on this small ridge that nearly surrounded the campsite. Perfect location to set up at, you're concealed, there's only one way in and one way out, ideal for any military camp. It rained a lot there though, so we stored our weapons and ammunition in this small rundown bunker just up the ridge from our site. We took shifts guarding it overnight, and let me tell you, it was the weirdest experience that I've ever had. So, I'm sleeping in my tent when I wake up to use the restroom. On my way back, I see the strobe light from my friend standing watch up on the hill. This wasn't normal. He was trying to signal someone without waking anyone up from yelling. So I head over to check on him, and he's shaking, eyes wide, complete fear and panic mode. And the conversation went something like this. Hey, are you okay, man? Dude, something's up here, man. What do you mean? Like North Koreans? Hell no, man. Worse. I'm hearing voices, and I saw shadows. I can hear rustling in the bunker, but every time I check it out, there's just nothing there. Huh. You sure you don't have just sleep deprivation? No, man. I'm completely fine, but I'm just freaking out. Could you chill with me until I just calm down a bit? Yeah, sure, okay. It was around 0300 when I stayed with him. Everyone was going to be awake in 2 hours, so it wouldn't be too long that I'd be up there anyway. But nothing happened while I was with him, so around 0400 he was back to normal and the sun was on the horizon. So I told him if he needed anything to yell and went back to bed for an hour. The following night it was my shift overnight, from 2200 to 0130, and it was quiet. It was kind of peaceful in fact, but at 0145 to 0200, I heard footsteps. steps. The bunker was to my back, and I was facing the camp, seeing as how the only way to reach this bunker is from the camp unless you can climb a 90-degree cliff from the other side of the ridge without anyone noticing. Everyone is asleep, but the footsteps were behind me near the bunker. So I turned around and saw nothing. Shortly after, I can hear faint whispers. Definitely not English, though, and I could almost make out Korean phrases, but it was too faint to know for sure. And this is where I started getting nervous. I remember seeing my friend's face when I came up to see him. His fear was genuine, very real, and I was starting to see why. Then, a little later, I hear something in the bunker. I turn my light on and shine it on the bunker, but no one's in there. And at 0300, I hear it again. This time, thinking that it was nothing again, I turn to look without my light, and I see the shadow of someone standing over the SMAWs, rocket launchers, bending down to pick one up. I raised my rifle at him and shouted to get the hell out of there, and it turned its head, looked at me, and then just vanished. Just evaporated, like Spider-Man in Infinity War. And panic struck me immediately. I was freaking out like my friend, and in my head I was thinking, what good is an M4 against a ghost? Nothing else happened after that, but I was definitely on edge until sunrise. I kept the story to myself until my unit got back to Japan, where we were stationed. One night we were all drinking, just shooting the breeze, and a different friend asked if the island seemed creepy to us. My first friend mentioned his experience on watch, and everyone, and I mean everyone, had some kind of similar story to tell from when they were on watch. Turns out, this island was a hotspot for strategic positioning and planning during the war, and thousands of soldiers and civilians died there. And I guess that the war isn't over for them yet. This happened in high school over 15 years ago. I was a 14 to 15-year-old male at the time. I've only ever had one experience like this, and I do believe that it was random. So, I grew up in an old two-story modest home with my mum in a small town in mid-Missouri. My bedroom was upstairs and rectangular in shape. It was long, spanning most of the length of the house. On one end was a window facing the street, and on the other end was the bedroom door. My bed was near the window side of the room. So that particular evening, I was up late watching some random shows in my room. I remember feeling uneasy, though. Something just didn't feel right, but I couldn't pinpoint what. It had been an uneventful day, so eventually I just got bored with the TV, crawled into bed, and somehow I just fell asleep. Instantly, though, I awoke and just shot straight up in bed. A crippling sense of dread consumed me. I was terrified and just couldn't explain why. And what really worried me was feeling that way in my own room, a familiar place where I'd always felt very safe. But for some reason, not that night. I felt like I just wasn't alone. I must have been sitting upright for 15 to 20 seconds before swinging my legs over toward the right side of the bed. I purposely kept my eyes low on my legs and the floor, and then, after several long seconds, which felt like an eternity, I slowly glanced upward toward the other end of the long room. It was mostly dark, except for a small amount of light from the dim street lamp outside that penetrated through the closed blinds behind me. This light provided just enough illumination to barely make out the layout of the room. And in front of me, halfway between my bed and the door, stood a dark, featureless, human-like shaped silhouette. When my eyes glimpsed it, I honestly felt petrified, and my first thought was to curl up fetal style underneath the blankets and hope that whatever it was would just go away. It was just a paralyzing fear, and I quickly rationalized that hiding under the blankets wouldn't get me away from whatever this thing was. I needed to get out of the room, and directly through it was the only way. I mustered up whatever courage I had, shakily stood up on both feet, and bolted toward the door to escape. While passing through it, I just felt the coldest sensation throughout my entire body, and every hair stood up straight, which made me run even faster. I got to the door, swung it open, and flew down the stairs, and I stayed down there for some time while trying to process what the hell just happened. I then went to the living room where our family dog, Trixie, a Rottweiler Pitbull mix, was sleeping in the kennel. I got her out, leashed her, and cautiously walked to the base of the stairs that led up to my room. I don't recall her acting weird or noticing anything, but I still felt something was up there, so we slept on the living room couch the rest of the night. And that was my only possible paranormal experience that I've ever had. Now, I didn't feel physically threatened by it, like my life was in danger or anything, but definitely got the feeling that I was unwanted, as if I had trespassed onto someone else's property and needed to get out now. Also, a couple of other things. My dog slept in my room often at night, but for whatever reason she was in the kennel that evening. I often wonder if she would have actually alerted me if she'd been in the room or not. Also, when I initially awoke, it felt like only minutes had passed since going to bed, but I'd actually been asleep for about 2 to 3 hours. The home is located at 702 North Clark in Mexico, MO. You can Google map it if you want, because it's the home with the grey roof and the very light green, almost white-coloured siding. It has cement stairs along the side, and the house used to have a large tree in the front yard that made it look a little creepy at night. The window to my old room is the upper left one. The other upstairs windows are a part of another bedroom. Anyway, thanks for listening, guys.